Today's lesson comes from Exodus chapter 20 to 32, and it is all about the 10 Commandments. But instead of me reading all 12 chapters out to you about the commandments of God, I thought, well, let's do this together. How many of the commandments can we remember? Go ahead and shout them out for me. Let's see if we can get at least the first 10. Go ahead. Alright, I am the Lord your God. Worship only me. Yes. Well, that's number one. What are the rest? Honor thy mother and father. Good. Guys, louder. I can't hear you. Thou shalt not. No, it doesn't say that. Very close, though. I know you learned it that way, but you learned it wrong. They taught you wrong all those years ago. Thou shalt not murder. In English, we have a distinction between the words murder and kill. They mean two different things. And the commandment is, do not murder.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor.
Thou shalt not cover a little bit more than just thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet anything that your neighbor has. Don't be jealous of your neighbor. Don't want everything your neighbor has. Well, it's their wife, their home, their house, their job, their car, whatever. All right, that's 4 of them you got. We've got 6 more to go. We're going to be here for a while. Don't commit adultery. Yes. Don't gossip or bear false witness. Good, that's 6. Getting closer. Don't build idols. Yes, 7. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Honor God's name. That's 8. There should be 2 more. Don't steal, right? I haven't heard that one.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
There we go. Well done. Honor the Sabbath. All right? Some of us had to go way back to remember those, but many of us have learned those throughout our lives. And that's what our reading is for today. Last night we got together, and I asked some folks we played word association, but we did it by drawing pictures. I gave them a word, and they drew a picture. And so I gave them these words, 3 different words: commandment, obey, and law, right? And I had them draw pictures. What are the first things, images that come to your mind? Draw them out for me. And it was amazing what the most popular image was. When I said the word obey, one person had an image of a whip, whipping someone. Another person had an image of someone bowing down on their knees before another person. And they all kind of followed suit. Commandments was very much in the same way. A lot of people drew a guy with 2 big stone tablets in their hands and by the commandments, right? Yeah, and so we started talking about this word association. How do we feel about the 10 Commandments? And how is it, what are the thoughts and the images that come into our minds when we talk about it? And it was amazing that we talk about obeying commandments. So quickly people go to ideas of subjecting someone or forcing someone else to do your will or having a whip in your hands. You know, that's the popular image that people have. That's where their mind goes to. And it unveils for us a little bit about how we feel about commandments. We don't like them. We don't like them as Americans. We think they're suppressive or oppressive, and they restrict freedom, and they force you to act in ways you don't want to. So we tend to have a negative image, believe it or not, of commandments. Now I know this is church, and everybody, if I asked you, you'd get up and say, oh, commandments are great, and they're relevant, and they're good for my life. But yeah, we don't always think about them all that much. And there's a lot of actual confusion about the 10 Commandments. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit, elaborate on the story of the 10 Commandments for you. Just give you some background information about them. Because we do have a lot of weird ideas about these commandments. So if you'll notice, our reading today is from Exodus chapter 20 to 32. It's actually 12 chapters long. That's a lot of verses about the commandments. And if you remember last week, or if you remember, you've been here throughout the summer, our subject is, our theme is we're learning to live with God. And we're following along these steps the Israelites and Moses together learned as they learned about their relationship with God and what it meant to live with God. Last week, we got to Mount Sinai. That's where we left off. The people had come and they got to meet God for the first time, a one-on-one, or actually a 1 on 100,000 or so. But they circled the mountain, and God spoke to them in an audible voice. And it was a powerful experience, lots of special effects, because God's voice was so powerful that nature and the surroundings responded when God's voice was spoken into creation. That's how powerful God's voice was. And as they're seeing this, God establishes a covenant with them. He says, we're going to have a special relationship. You're going to be my treasured possessions. And they learn that they're supposed to obey God. And right away we learned that God is blessing them. And remember our lesson from last week was that God's blessings are like gifts that are given to us on our birthday party. And when we disobey God, when we sin, what we're doing is we're taking those unopened gifts that have already been given to us and we're throwing them in the trash. Because that's what sin does to God's blessings that have already been given to us in our life. Sin destroys them. And it's rude to God, and it's just sad for our own lives when we do that. And so the people right away, they say, God, we'll do whatever you want. We're going to obey you. And so what happens on that very next moment? Well, beginning chapter 20, God begins to explain to them, okay, you're my people. We have a special relationship. This is how you're going to live as my people. And he starts to give them commandments, or literally rules of life. You know what a rule of life is, right? You see a penny on the ground, always pick it up. That's like a rule of life, right? Or measure twice, cut once. That's like a rule of life, right? So that's what God is doing. He's giving them these rules of life so that they will know how to act as God's people. And he begins to announce them. He goes, number 1, number 2, all the way down to number 10, right? And guess what happens after he gets to number 10? People say, enough! We can't handle this, God. This is way too scary for us. How about we do this? Moses, you go up onto the mountain and spend time with God, and you listen to God, and you come tell us what God has to say, all right? Imagine that. They're hearing the audible voice of God. God is giving them these rules of life, these commandments. This is how you should live. And they say, this is too much. It's too scary. Literally, that's the story in Exodus 20. Moses, you go talk to God. It's too much for us. And you can tell us what God says. We'll believe you, right? And so Moses does that. He goes up on the mountain, and guess what Moses does? He gets the rest of the commandments. You see, there aren't 10 commandments. Anybody want to guess how many commandments there really are? 37? A bit higher. 92. Higher. Come on. Not even close. It's 613. You can go and count them if you want. That's why it's 12 chapters long. And actually, some of them are listed in Leviticus. They're not even all listed in those 12 chapters. See, we get this idea of 10 commandments because it was just the first 10, and it's in Exodus 20, but the people gave up on God. They didn't give God a chance to stop. Because God had a whole bunch of commands for them, instructions about how they were to live with God. And so we're getting at the heart of what it means to learn to live with God, is that God gives us these commands, these rules of life that says, this is how you're going to be my people. And there was one kind of, my biggest observation as I read through these commandments is that they all have to do with relationships. Relationships with God, relationships with yourself, relationships with your family, or the people in the community around you. Every single one of them has somehow connected to relationships. And what is God's overwhelming desire throughout all of these? He wants us to have healthy, loving relationships. Now, as you read through, if you care to go back and read through all 613 of these commandments, you'll notice that some of them actually seem kind of, well, archaic, lost, for lack of a better word. And that's because God's speaking specifically to the nation of Israel, saying, this is who you are. These are the kinds of relationships I want you to have. But, this is the thing. God also says there's some promises that go along with these commandments, these rules of life. There are some promises that says this is what you get if you will obey me. Now, and it's not even just the blessings. We talked about the blessings last week. There are 3 more things that God promises them. And the first one is this. You get healthy relationships. If you all live together like this and follow these rules of life, these commandments, you're going to have loving, healthy relationships. Not the broken, dysfunctional stuff that we see on network television every evening, but the real thing. That's what you get. The second thing is that you get to hear from me all the time then. You see, hearing from God is dependent upon us keeping the communication channels open. And as we learn to obey these commandments, This is what God said to Israel. You will hear from me all the time. You will be able to talk to me and listen and hear and respond. We will have vital communication. And the third thing is that I have made you my people so that you can have a special mission. You're going to teach the world that they need a Savior. That's why I'm giving you so many of these things, because they're going to help you fulfill your mission. Now, Israel doesn't get any of that. They misunderstand. They think the commandments are things that they do in order to make themselves right before God, worthy of God, right? If they just obey all the commandments, then God will finally love them, and they will get to go to heaven. That's the predominant thought that they had, and that's the thought that the church has inherited and has held on to, and it's just wrong. Jesus, many years after this, he's going to meet the nation of Israel. He's going to come, he's going to live among them, and he's going to be really frustrated at their attitude towards commands. They got it all wrong. They got the wrong word association with this idea of obedience. They missed the boat. And so, on the night before he's betrayed, he's going to gather his disciples together for one final meal. And in that meal, he's going to impart to them so many important truths that are going to help sustain them. But the most important thing he says to them in that very last meal, in that very last evening he has with them, is he tells them, I'm going to give you a new commandment. I'm going to simplify it for you, okay? I'm going to establish in a few days a new covenant between you and between God, and I'm going to give you a brand new commandment, and this is the one you're going to have to fulfill. This is the one you're going to have to uphold. You guys know what that commandment was? Love one another. In fact, this is how I want you to love the world. Love the world as I have loved you. In fact, I want your love for each other to be so incredible, so unique, so different from the world that everyone, when they see you, this is how they're going to know you, by your love. And because you do that, several things are going to happen. The same things that God promised Israel. If you do that, then you're going to have healthy, vital relationships. You're going to be able to hear from me in ways that this world can never do. We're going to have dialogue. And you will fulfill the mission that I have given you. That's what God's commandments are all about. They're all about us being the people God created us to be. We mix it up. We messed it up. The church has done this over the ages. They've communicated the same thing over and over again. Obey God's commandments, and you will be loved by God. Obey God's commandments, and you get to go to heaven. Repent. In fact, today, we ask people word association. What do you think of churches? What do they think of? Arrogance, judgmentalness, condemnation. The church is more known for being politically sided one way than they are as people of love. So as we think of these commandments, this is what we need to do. We need to understand that they are rules of life that help unlock our relationship with God, to open it up so that we can receive those blessings, so that we can have healthy relationships, so that we can hear from God, so that we can fulfill God's mission. In order to help us out, I want you to do something. Grab a pen. There's pens in the pews. Take your bulletin. I want you to take a few moments to write some things down for me. There should be plenty of pens in the pews. Write on your bulletin, because you're going to take your bulletin home with you. I want you to write 4 new commandments for yourself, based on this big overarching commandment that Jesus gave to us, that is at the heart of our relationship with Him. Love one another. How are you going to love? How are you going to bring this commandment into your life? Because that's what God was doing with those 613 commandments. He was helping them to say, I want to specifically get down to basics about how you're going to be as my people. And Jesus said, this is our new commandment. This is how we're going to fulfill God's mission. I want you to take some time and to write 4 new rules of life, or 4 commandments. Maybe they're old ones that you've always known. But I want you to write them about yourself. Take a moment to do so. They could be like, I want to go out and wash my neighbor's car, because that's how I'm going to communicate to my neighbor that I love him or her. I love them. Right? Something specific. How this week you want to, what is a command that you want to take from God about loving someone else? Take a few moments to write those down. All right. For the takeaways today, I want to skip over the takeaways that are on the screen. Don't put those up there. I want you to use what you wrote down as your takeaways. I want you during the offering, as the offering plates go by, keep this piece of paper because you need to take it home so you can remember everything. But I want you to think in terms of this is part of your offering. Is that you want to say to God, these are your commands. You commanded me to love one another. This is how I'm going to fulfill that command this week. And use those as your takeaway. Think about it. Put them on your refrigerator. Do something to remind yourself sometime throughout this week. And watch how we obey this command of God, what happens to our life, how our lives are changed. And feel free to share with me some stories about the impact this has on your life throughout this week. Let's stand for our hymn of the day.